Hi, everybody, and welcome to the wonderful world of noun clauses. I know that this is kind of a big leap um, and causes some stress. So I wanted to go over noun clauses and hopefully give you a better idea of what's going on, how to diagram them, how to identify them, and to just generally get you feeling more comfortable. Before we get into noun clauses, I wanted to remind you about how simple it can be. I know it doesn't feel simple, but I think once we get to noun clauses, we see all of this stuff going on and we tend to forget the basics. So keep in mind that noun clauses are phrases that are functioning as a noun. The entire phrase as a unit is functioning as a noun, which means they can replace anything in a sentence that is functioning as a noun. So they could be a subject, they could be a subjective complement, which would be patterns 3 and 5, or they could be a direct object that we have in patterns 7 through 10. They could be an indirect object or an object of a preposition, or they could be an objective complement, which is pattern 10. So anywhere you see on these sentence patterns a noun, a subject, a complement, an object, keep in mind that these noun clauses, these phrases, are taking the place of that one letter. So if you can kind of picture the simplicity of that one letter on the diagram, it helps make things a little bit easier. So now let's go to how to identify and diagram a noun clause. Keep in mind that a clause has to have a subject and verb at the very least. There's generally other stuff going on, but there has to be a subject and a verb. As I said before, it takes the place of a simple noun in a sentence, those N's or S or DOs that we saw on the cheat sheet. It's a dependent clause, otherwise known as an incomplete sentence, which means it can't stand on its own. So it has a subject and verb, but it doesn't express a complete thought. When you're trying to diagram and identify, it helps to remember that they can be replaced by these nouns: it, something, or someone, depending on where it is and how it's functioning in the sentence. So the first thing I do if I'm thinking a sentence has a noun clause in it is I look for the trigger words that are going to send up a red flag so I know that there's a noun clause following. And those are interrogatives and expletives. Interrogatives are going to be part of the noun clause. They carry meaning in the sentence, and they're diagrammed in the sentence where they would be normally. So this first who, whoever, whom, whoever, what, whatever are diagrammed as nouns. They serve as subject or objects in the sentence. Which and whose are diagrammed in the noun clause in the place of an adjective. Under the noun they modify. And then when, where, why, and how are diagrammed as adverbs. Again, these are the ones that they answer those same questions that we've been harping on all semester. And those adverbs are going under the verbs they modify. Expletive carry no real weight or meaning in the sentence. They're just there to help the flow and to help it feel right. So they're diagrammed above the verb with a dotted line. And some common ones are if, that, whether, and whether or not. Once you've determined that there's a noun clause, you've found those trigger words. I tend to circle those and then I underline the noun clause. And then you need to determine what part of speech the noun clause is functioning as. And keep in mind, it's filling those same roles that those simple nouns do in the diagrams. So it can be a subject, meaning this whole noun clause is doing the action of the verb. Disappearing, has disappeared, and these all go on pedestals, so this goes in the subject spot. It can be the subjective complement, which means it is at the end of the sentence in a predicate modifying the subject. So there's that backslash pointing back to the subject. So we have subject and verb in the sentence, and then we have the question was what. So up on a pedestal, again, referring back to clarifying the idea of question. It can be a direct object, so it's receiving the direct action of the verb. We wondered what. We wanted this whole thing. If the train had arrived. So that's the direct object. It can be an indirect object. You should give a bonus 2. Again, there's that implied 2 that would go on the slant for the preposition whoever sells the most. So that's functioning as the direct or the indirect object, excuse me. It can be an objective complement, which again is at the end of the sentence, and it's only in sentence pattern 10, and it's referring back to clarifying the direct object, the bribe. And it can be an object of a preposition. So prepositional phrases consist of a preposition, sometimes some other words, but it always ends with a noun. So that's the other thing. Once you've identified these trigger words, you want to also look for any prepositions in case it is the object of the preposition. And that, sorry, this should be up on a pedestal. It shouldn't be on that main line. I did that wrong. So just pretend that that's up on a pedestal. And it can be an appositive, which we haven't really talked about yet. An appositive is just a phrase that follows a noun, and it's just clarifying. It goes in parentheses because it's not a necessary part of the sentence. And that's an easy way to remember appositives. Usually they are enclosed by commas, and you could take it out of the sentence and it would still make sense. Your decision is not very important. The appositive doesn't have to be there. It's just giving us extra information. All of these other ones, the other examples that we've looked at, parts of speech, have to be there for the sentence to make sense, but the appositive doesn't. And then again, they're all diagrammed on a pedestal above the same line. Remember that nouns are always diagrammed on horizontal lines. So the pedestals are going to be diagrammed on those horizontal lines. And now I just want to back up a little bit and talk about where things are going in the noun clauses. So we're going to move beyond the entire sentence and just look specifically at noun clauses. Keep in mind that the interrogatives are part of the diagram and the expletives are not. So whoever rang the doorbell, we have a verb rang and we have an object, but we don't have a subject specifically. So this whoever is functioning as the subject. Here we have our whether or not, which is that trigger word. The expletive goes above. So it's diagrammed above the verb. It's not part of the meaning of the sentence. And so that one would be diagrammed just, it's a normal sentence with subject, verb, etc. Whoever, again, we've seen that one. Here we have what was necessary, again, functioning as the subject. Here's one that I wanted to focus on in the object of the preposition. Again, imagine this is on a pedestal. He is famous for what he drew. There's our interrogative, the word that shows us, that kind of sends up that red flag that we're looking at a noun clause. In this case, it's the object of a preposition, so we're going to diagram our preposition, and then we're going to diagram our noun clause, just like we would a normal sentence. I look for subject, which is he, drew, which is an action verb, and then my question is, he drew what? And that literally answers the question. What becomes the direct object? We tend to want to put things in order, in the syntactical order that we see in the sentence. And so it's kind of uncomfortable for us to put this what at the end, because in the sentence, it precedes the subject and the verb. But grammatically, and again, we're always focused on function in this class, grammatically, it is functioning, the interrogative what is functioning as the direct object of the verb, so it has to follow that. And then this one is the same, it's functioning as the subject, so that wouldn't be very different. Once you've got all of that, remember that these clauses are complete sentences. They have a subject and a verb. I guess they're not complete sentences, they're clauses, so they have a subject and a verb. And anytime you have a subject and a verb, you have to consider it as a sentence, and it needs to be labeled with a sentence pattern. So you're going to have at least 2 sentence patterns for all of these, perhaps more if it's a compound sentence or something else. So make sure with your diagrams from now on that you consider, is it just one sentence, or is there a clause that I need to identify a sentence pattern with as well? I hope this helps. I know this is a huge leap. It takes a while to get used to this. Just look at a lot of examples, try practicing, look at sentences and find those interrogatives or those expletives. And if you have questions, if you're continuing to struggle, please let me know and we can go over it and I can answer any questions. This will be on your next exam, exam number 2. So I do want you to get comfortable with this as soon as possible.